Hi, I'm Peggy Deamer of the Architecture Lobby. It is my pleasure to interview three organizers from the Architecture Lobby's Academic Working Group. The Academic Working Group was initiated because of the realization that academia, as much as the profession, produces the compliant and exploitable architecture worker. The main output of the academic working group has been the Architecture Beyond Capitalism School, what we call the ABC School, a virtual summer program that offers, it believes, an architecture education that is capable of redirecting a capitalist, market-driven, development-led built environment. Welcome Tessa Forde, currently in Chile, but a resident of New Zealand, which is where I am. Rebecca Carrai, currently in Florence, Italy, and Renzo Dagnino in Cordoba, Argentina. I'm going to run through some questions, which you can answer very personally, but I think combined make up a certain organizational ideology for the academic working group. So the first question is how you each recognized that you needed to take action to change architectural education, a kind of aha moment and its context. So Tessa, do you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm an architectural worker and teacher from Aotearoa, New Zealand, living in Chile. And I was always a very involved student, and I actually loved architecture school. And it's only in retrospect that I can see the problems with it. And I think my real disillusionment with architecture started when entering the workforce, and these kind of big ideas and aspirational kind of theories about architecture sort of disappeared into bathroom tiles and stair specifications for kind of just continuing or building the wealth of very wealthy people. And I think maybe my love of school kind of pushed me towards organizing schools, and so I've organized various kind of schools and collectives in architecture. And I feel that school for me is this kind of aha moment. It's this place that can exist outside of academic institutions and be a really powerful setting for imagining and performing other ways of being and knowing and thinking and practicing architecture. And so the ABC School especially is an opportunity to connect to an international network of change makers and organizers. And I see it as a really critical space for international solidarity and an opportunity to build collective momentum at a much larger scale. Yeah.
Um, cool. Rebecca, I wonder what got you going and made you think of an activist and organizer within the academic space.
Yeah, I think in a way I agree with Tessa that it was when entering into workforce because I started having these thoughts on architecture when I started my PhD in architecture history and theory in Belgium, and the PhD is both an educational and work also duty that I was undertaking. And so as a PhD student, I had a much greater realization of some let's say I realized how certain injustices and certain systemic issues that affected the architecture practice could translate and could be also reflected in academia and in architectural education. And so I heard from a colleague of mine by then about the ABC school. We just had its first edition. And so I decided to join, and I proposed with Renzo and Monica. We together proposed an online seminar, which involved quite an interesting group of people coming from different parts of the world and who shared similar concerns on the studio, specifically on how studio is taught and on the hegemonic ideas that tend to be imposed on students during studio courses. But this was, let's say, the starting point for me to then reflect and broaden up this issue and see it reflected also elsewhere. And yes, through my academic practice, writing is also a way for me to engage in a sort of activist activity, and also as a form of organizing my thought, organizing them for me, for myself, but also to disseminate them to a limited but still audience.
Cool. Renzo, maybe you can tell us how you got radicalized and began to see that activism was necessary for you.
Thank you, Peggy. Hi, everyone. In my case, I would say that it was probably not a specific moment, but it was being submerged in a specific reality. I'm from Latin America, from Argentina. So in that sense, being from the periphery, you experience on a daily basis its friction, the precariousness of the social fabric of institutions, very volatile economy. So in that sense, the disillusion and, to be honest, the anger came naturally. This huge motivation to try to see a radically different society, not only a disciplinary practice or architectural education, but as a whole systematic issue. But I would say that came naturally from being from where I'm from. And in that sense, I think that the ABC school and participating in the ABC school was a way to channel all that energy into an effective change. But also I would say from a multi-scalar perspective, in the way that we could address very specific issues with a specific context, but also from a global perspective. And also, as Tessa was saying and Rebecca was saying, also by engaging in a global conversation when we can learn from each other, we can share experiences, methodologies, etc. So we can help each other to effect change.
I love that answer. I love hearing from all of you. So now I wonder what you all believe are the main challenges to transforming architecture education, and how you are organizing to enact that transformation and overcome those challenges. Rebecca, do you maybe want to start with this one?
Yeah, I'll try. I mean, I think for me the main point here is that as Renzo just mentioned, I think architecture cannot be disentangled from its contextual and social and financial reality. So in order to reform architectural education or architecture at large in the context of Italy, I think we need to go through a little bit through the kind of precarious state of especially young generations, which are forced to either leave to find better opportunities and a more supportive political system, or in case they decide to stay, they face increasing precarity, and often they are forced to also work in a job sector which isn't what they wanted or what they studied for. And so I experienced this kind of precarity and insecurity that is linked to the culture of work in architecture myself, and I saw it also unfolding among my circle of friends and colleagues. Most people either left Italy or stayed, but with very few certainties. And this means that studying architecture has become, especially in a context which is by default precarious and has some political instabilities and little support for people, studying architecture seems to be a sort of a lost investment, because it requires a long circle of studies and personal sacrifices, financial efforts, and so on. And so I think the first, to me, in order to address the architectural question, we also need to look back at the societal and contextual question. And this requires, I think, architects, or I mean, whoever works in architecture, to engage with politics, to engage with political ideas, but also to find ways to let their architectural thinking, whatever they do, infiltrate into politics, into spatial policies, and so on.
Super interesting. Renzo, do you want to describe what you think the main challenges are and methods to overcome them?
I think that, as Rebecca was saying, probably in our architectural education and architecture as a discipline, but mostly in our lives, I think that we're subject to the tyranny of capital and its quantitative logics. So in that sense, I would probably say that that's the main issue that I see right now, because it spreads all over to architectural education, to the disciplinary practice. And I think that we as architects, we have a lack of understanding of the quantitative logic and its ethos. So in a way, I think that the ABC School, the architectural lobby, I consider them to be places of possibility, in the sense that we are trying to develop conceptual frameworks and tools and artifacts in order to counter those capitalist and quantitative logics that are totally controlling our practice, our professional practice, and our academic practice. So in that sense, I believe that spaces such as the ABC schools can be the platform where we start to talk about these issues, and in a way start enacting maybe small changes in architectural, for instance, with the ABC school in architectural education, rethinking the studio, for example, what Rebecca was saying that we did in 2022, but also to try to enlarge this discourse and trying to effect change on a broader scale.
Interesting. Tessa, I wonder what you think the main obstacles are and how organizing can overcome them.
For me, we can't change architecture education without changing the architecture discipline, and we can't change the architecture discipline without changing how we relate, both in a regulatory sense and in a kind of spiritual sense, to land. And so I think that there's been a kind of dematerialization of physical materials through the commodification of land and buildings. And I think that architecture is a fundamentally material practice, but we're quite disconnected from the material realities of construction and the consequences of those material realities. And so for me, particularly in my teaching and in my practice, I'm trying to think about how to make those materialities more real, to think about the people in those processes of extraction, to think about how architects design buildings, but they also design wholes. They have to think about designing the absence of the materials, the places that those materials come from, and this kind of architecture of the supply chain, this vast network of these people, materials, and ecosystems and other beings, and so on, that are marked and exploited by the construction industry. And so it's, for me, a kind of practical way into this, and it's really a very small step, but it's through urban building technology and through engaging with constructing shared environments together with local materials. And it can be quite profound for students, for example, if they're building an earthen wall, to dig a hole and then to build something with that hole, but to recognize that the hole that they made. And through that process, through the process of building things together, you learn quite tangible and tacit organizing skills that can help you then to advocate and imagine other relationships to materials and how that they can be regulated through different kinds of land contracts and building codes.
I think in some way that answer and all your answers kind of lead to my final question for you, but I'll ask it more specifically, which is, what is your hope for future architectural workers? Do you have advice for them? What do you vision will be different for them than what we're doing now in terms of our volunteer work and our organizational work?
My hope for future architectural workers is that they don't have the same issues as we do right now. I believe that there was a very interesting phrase from an Argentinian activist from the early 20th century who said that the pains that we have are the rights that we lack. And in that sense, I believe that acknowledging that we're still far from our objective is the first step. And the second step is that we have to organize and work together towards that step. I think that spaces such as these enable us to engage in these very necessary conversations about the pains that we have in order to be able to organize, in order to gain the rights that we believe that we deserve. And I think that's incredibly important to have spaces such as this. And remembering another phrase from a Uruguayan writer, Galeano, he said that he was wondering what was the function of the horizon. And he said, if you walk 2 steps towards the horizon moves 2 steps away. I think that it's super interesting to figure out that our objective, although it's constantly moving away, it makes us to go forward towards it. So in that sense, I believe that the constant struggle, the constant organization to move towards that horizon, to fulfill that objective, I think that's probably my advice for future architectural workers, is that they should always keep walking. And although that horizon may be moving away, they should keep going.
Thank you. Tessa, I wonder what you envision for future architectural workers.
I'm really hopeful that my sort of vision for the future of architecture is that architecture can be a facilitatory practice in supporting communities to imagine and then realize their shared environments together. And that can be a process that is both ethical and regenerative. And for that, we have to organize and we have to gather differently. And we need to be a part of and be a much more engaged and political part of the systems that are currently creating and constructing our shared environments. And so for me, I think that every architecture worker needs a space in which they can imagine and enact and perform a different future with other people, and then use that vision to organize and advocate for regulatory change. And so I hope that space is available to future architecture workers and current architecture workers. And if it's not, that we can build that space together.
What I'm hearing is a confirmation of things that both Rebecca and Renzo have said, which is a future of architecture that's more political and knows how to organize around political relevance and power. So it's great to hear that. So Rebecca, finally, what do you think are the possible futures for architecture and architectural workers?
Yeah, I agree with Renzo and Tessa. I think for me, the key question is how to regain a voice in whatever deals with space, and the current approach to space, which is that of capitalizing space and gentrifying city, pushing residents out, and so on. In a way, I also think that it doesn't really matter if it will be the architect or someone else. I mean, there are many spatial questions which can be solved and addressed by architects in tandem with also more experts in the field. I guess I think I would encourage the future generation of architects to be more aware of any kind of spatial issue and how these spatial issues are often inherently both architectural and political. On one hand, I think institutions could have a voice in that, and architects or people working behind institutions could have a voice in that. At the same time, I also feel that there is a collective disillusionment with institutions also within architecture. And this is definitely true, starting from politics and from the fact that many people now don't go to vote anymore. So we are living this kind of climate of disillusionment. But on the other hand, I think that it is important that architects or people who are concerned with designing and deciding for space put their voice out and collaborate and team up with different kinds of organizations. This can be bottom-up or more top-down organizations. It can be organizing within the ABC, but it can also be, and other maybe more bottom-up organizations. I'm thinking of something that was founded in 2017 in Italy, Disordine degli Architetti, that started to really advocate for change in the profession and expose certain injustices that were taking place in the architectural profession. But this can also happen at higher levels, and I'm thinking now of House Europe, a recent initiative that has reached out to the European Union with arguments about the finiteness of our land and how we could rethink the current mainstream approach to space, which is generally that of demolishing buildings and building from scratch and all the consequences that this leads to.
I love these answers. And again, they all kind of emphasize what I think the point of the Architecture Lobby's exhibition here at the Venice Biennale is, which is to connect outside of ourselves, connect outside of our own specific organizations and connect architecture outside of its own disciplinary silo and be in the world. And so your answers all kind of confirm a goal that that I think is part of this whole enterprise that the Architecture Lobby is doing. So thank you. I just want to say, from my point of view, whatever the results of our organizational work is, it's been a pleasure to be involved with the three of you, not just in this conversation, but in our work in the academic working group. So that's a pleasure and a success for me in and of itself. So thank you very much, you three. See you soon.